Hello and welcome to the 24th episode of the Pepper Podcast. For those who are returning, welcome back. And if you are new, the Pepper Podcast covers a wide range of spicy events that occur in our daily lives. Two high school students tackle heated topics through discussion. I'm your host, Jay Mehta, and joining me is my co-host, Indy Watanabe. And today's topic is an update on the effects of space travel on the extraterrestrial space and the increasing amount of materials being released, while also exploring the necessity of extraterrestrial exploration. Helium-3, an isotope of helium, is valued at about $1,400 per gram, and if combined with deuterium, which we'll talk about later, can produce incredible amounts of energy. Just 1 kilogram of it can create 19 megawatt hours of energy. So some of you may be a little bit confused on why we brought up helium-3. And so I guess we can go into, first of all, a major discovery that happened. And so
Right.
China found a mineral on the moon called Changesite. And what's
Yes.
so important, do you want to talk about what it is or
Yeah. Yeah, I can do that. So, from a vial of space dust collected in the winter of 2020, the Chinese have figured out that what they've dubbed Changesite Y, which is named after Chang'e or Chang'e, after the goddess of the moon. And basically, their lunar sample gathering rover, Chang'e 5, collected it, and then when it got tested, they found this new crystal mineral, which is incredibly rare in on Earth, like occurring naturally on Earth.
yeah.
And its chemical composition contains helium-3, which is a heavier isotope of helium that has existed naturally within the Earth's crust since primordial times, but has slowly escaped into outer space over like epochs and millennia, which is
Hmm.
and it's now super rare on Earth.
Yeah.
However, it's believed to be a valuable source of nuclear fusion energy, and yeah, that's basically what China has discovered or rediscovered on the moon to have like that the moon has like a lot of helium-3 and Changesite Y from the solar
Hmm.
winds.
Yeah. So like you said, what's really important about Changasite is its potential for energy. And so like you said, Changasite contains helium-3. And helium-3 is extremely rare in the United States.
Mhm.
Sorry, not even just in the United States, in the world.
The
So
world, yeah.
just on Earth, helium-3 is very hard to find. It's very just kind of it's not natural, right? Because it's a heavier form of helium.
Right.
And so for that reason, it's kind of a lot more difficult for people to use it, but that's why it's
Mhm.
extremely valuable, like we mentioned. So it's around fourteen hundred
Yeah.
dollars per gram of helium-3 per gram. So 100, like 220 pounds, which is 100 kilograms, is $140 million. But taking that into account, that would produce so much energy. And so what's so important about helium-3 is that it is carbon free and it burns cleanly. And so
Right.
what people do is they take the helium-3, and instead of using nuclear energy, which is clean for the environment, it's carbon free in
Right.
that aspect, but it produces waste. But the thing is with helium-3, it burns cleanly, it has zero waste. The only problem is that it's very expensive, extremely
Right.
expensive. So
Yeah.
it's a lot harder to kind of like continue production of it because, again, like you said, it's very difficult to add
Yeah.
another neutron or such to helium, which makes it a lot
Right.
more exciting and a lot more unstable. And so there's a
Hmm.
lot of problems with this, even creating it to get into, that
Right.
which we'll discuss later. But yeah,
Exactly.
so what's also so important that we also mentioned is that it's on the moon, which is very interesting.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
estimated that the value of helium-3 on the moon, given its current price, would be
Hmm.
1.543 quadrillion dollars.
Yeah.
To put that
Yeah.
into
And
perspective, sorry to put that into perspective, we have not even met a trillionaire yet,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Right. And what's so scary about that is with the amount of Changasite or slash helium-3 on the moon,
Hmm.
it kind of opens up a new possibility of a second kind of space race. And instead of going to space or being the first ones to like send a human to space in space, it's kind of like we're trying to get to the moon to extract as much helium-3 as we can to have the power to produce this insane amount of energy, right? And so we're already
Yeah.
seeing China planning to send, I believe, have believing to send three orbiters to the moon over the next 10 years, um, which was inspired by the Changesite discovery. And we don't know how like other countries, the US, Russia, Japan, Korea, how other countries may react
Hmm.
to get there first to control this incredibly valuable substance.
Yeah. And just that you mentioned that, like, I just found that the there's estimates to suggest that 1.1 million metric tons of helium-3 are on the lunar surface, and that's enough to power human energy needs for, just give me a guess how long.
Uh, 200 years.
10,000 years.
Oh
Human
my.
The entire global amount for 10,000 years. That's a lot. That's a lot of energy. And so yeah, like you said, it's very important that it'll become the next space race almost. And so this is slightly it's I have mixed feelings about this personally because wow, we have something that because I don't know if people are previous listeners, but we're big on energy and we're big on the climate. That a
Right.
lot of our
Yeah.
episodes are on that. So we are
Exactly.
finding, and it's not like we've completely found helium-3, right? Like there's
Right.
helium-3 in
Right.
the world. We use it for X-raying technology and such, but it's
Yeah.
in extreme kind of minute quantities. And so the problem becomes that there's this abundant amount. There's this untapped resource, and if history repeats itself, anytime
Right.
there's an abundance of resources or an untapped resource, developed countries kind of have to rush at it. And so,
Hmm.
like you
Yeah.
said, I do think that there's going to be a space race, and I'm excited to see that we're going to have, a carbon neutral resource that we may be able to use in the future. But I'm also
Right.
scared to see how countries are going to use this to their advantage and how this could possibly
Exactly.
become the next energy crisis. So this is
Yeah.
quite exciting yet alarming at the same time.
Yeah. I agree. And with that discovery of Changesite on the moon from China, we will keep tracking this, and obviously we'll, if any new developments or breakthroughs occur with any other uh, kind of energy source,
Yeah.
we'll update you. And yeah,
So
so Jay, would you like to talk about increasing debris being deposited in space?
sure. So, but before I quickly mention that, just a few
Hmm.
things that are the issues with using helium-3 though. Just like first of all, like no one's ever used helium-3 to create this process to create like a large amount of energy. It's very new. It's a novel thing that we've had such an abundance amount, or an abundant amount that is very rare for us to even think about the idea of using that much helium-3 to create this energy.
Right, right, right,
And
right.
second, there on Earth, there's not enough helium-3 to be used in a nuclear power plant. So we can't
Yeah,
even use it in the first place on Earth. But now that we have this resource in the moon, now it's going to be how to figure out to like it's going to be figuring out how to get that back to Earth from
exactly.
the moon.
Yes,
And then third, extracting helium-3 from the moon soil will require, like I said, superheating rocks on the surface of the moon, and then a process for doing this in space would need to be developed. So it'd be difficult for, because it's just a time of technology, figuring out the technology, which would take a
exactly.
lot of
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
and then a spacecraft would also be needed to transport that. So that's a lot to
Mhm.
learn about
Really
using
is.
helium-3, but I think this is very interesting that could solve just the needs of Earth as we're growing, as we need more
Yeah,
energy. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
going into debris. So on a
Yes.
previous episode, which you can look out before, we talked about space junk and how there's a lot of space junk in
Right.
the just extraterrestrial space that we have.
Yeah, and how
And
problematic it is. Yeah.
exactly. And so for that, there's been less and less
Hmm.
like I guess debris that has been introduced. But the
Hmm.
thing has become just a little bit of an update. A Chinese, and I'm gonna get this perfectly right before I say anything. So a Chinese rocket body has broken up in orbit after a successful satellite launch. So it launched successfully, but in space it broke into 50 pieces or more than 50 pieces of debris. And so this is in November 12th, 2022. So very fairly recently. This has caused a lot of controversy. And so what like we mentioned, it's very problematic for debris to be introduced into space because it's very difficult for it to be stopped. It's
Yeah.
nearly actually impossible for it to be stopped, and so
Yeah.
it's especially annoying when accidentally, quote unquote, just a little bit more debris that
Yeah.
50 pieces of debris is I mean debris as in like it's a part of a rocket, like the body of a rocket is broken up into 50 pieces. It's
Yeah.
still each of those 50 pieces are still going to be large, right? And it's going to
Right.
continuously break down into smaller and smaller pieces, which is going to be harder for people to maybe in the future. And this ties perfectly, actually. So this is, I'll hit it this time. This is our perpetual cycle, where
Yeah.
if we need to go to the moon, right, to extract Changesite, we're gonna have to evade all this debris, and we're gonna have to at the same time create more debris. And so then it's gonna be
Right.
harder to navigate through the debris, right? Which makes it
Yeah.
harder to get Changesite, but we need the Changesite, right? So it's this cycle of just making it worse on ourselves. And
Yeah.
so, like I said, though, this disastrous introduction of debris has, caused uproar among countries. People are very upset, including the
Right.
United States and NASA, because, I
Mhm.
mean, nobody wants to see more debris.
Right. And I think it's pretty ironic since recently, or in recent years, the Chinese government, has kind of criticized Elon Musk and his Starlink uh, satellite for kind of entering the atmosphere and crashing and causing debris to be split up in space. When this isn't a uniquely you know Elon Musk problem. It's something that like it's not something that like a political government can kind of focus on and blame on one body, because if they do it too, and
Yeah,
because that's just a part of space exploration and missions to space, right?
yeah,
You need to hold that kind of standard across all uh, agencies, including ones in your own country, even though it may not be in your favor, right?
yeah,
It's a super crucial topic that we need to discuss. And going into that, like space junk, also like I know recently I've been getting into some conversations at school, especially about like space exploration and kind of is it necessary? Is it worth it? Is it like
yeah,
and the cons outweigh the pros or vice versa. So let's discuss that.
yeah. I want
Right.
your opinion on that, actually.
Okay. So before I get into that, right, I neglected to state that in recent years, the Japanese, recently, like very recently, the Japanese government, their aerospace exploration agency has joined with Astroscale, which is a company that's headquartered in Tokyo, to complete the world's first debris removal mission and offer routine removal services by 2030. Right, so we're now seeing government agencies like large companies taking the initiative and recognizing that space debris does pose a dangerous problem, right? To not only people on Earth, but people who are going into space, right? And also China is also getting in on the action
Yeah.
with their Origin Space, which is a space mining startup based in Shenzhen, which last year they launched a prototype of a robot that can snag space debris with a large net. And what's interesting is it's, you're talking about space races to like the moon to
Yeah,
get Changesite, but this seems like it's a space race to clean space, right?
exactly.
And I think it's a really good step in the right direction when it comes to like space debris and analyzing like the environmental effects that it has, the human health effects, etc. And it's a space race that I can confidently say am excited to watch, right?
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Because if say like Japan and China go at it, right?
Yeah,
They're both developing, trying to develop technologies, trying to get to space, trying to see who can clean up the most trash,
yeah,
right? Kind of like that when teachers are like, "Okay, guys, whatever student can clean up the most trash
yeah.
wins, whatever."
It's a win-win
And
scenario.
it's a win-win scenario, right?
Exactly,
It's a win-win for the government and it's a win-win for Earth
exactly.
and you future humans. So yeah, but going back to
Yes.
my stance on space exploration. So I think what's super important is that we analyze both the pros and the cons for
Mm-hmm.
space exploration, right? So some pros for space exploration in like studying stuff and searching for extraterrestrial life, all that. So we learn about human health
Yeah.
like on Earth. Right? We can like I know the Kelly twins. One of them was an astronaut, right? Went to space for like a however long, and then the other one stayed on Earth. And we studied like the effect that gravity has on bones, on blood pressure, on a bunch of human health related topics. And we got so much information from that one experiment that we can connect many other experiments on in space and how humans fare in weightlessness and in a space environment and kind of apply that knowledge on Earth and how to and we can like increase the quality of healthcare, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, space exploration efforts increases economic growth and like spurs that growth because it increases like skilled job growth, gives back to the economy and like develops technology and kind of provides that incentive. And before I did research on this topic, I actually thought that like the amount of money that NASA used from the US budget was astronomical, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when compared to the military, right, where that tech that really is a lot,
Yeah.
only about 0.5% of the US national budget is allocated to NASA. Which
Mm.
to me, like 0.5% of the US budget is really not a lot in the grand scheme of like the total US budget.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We use like I believe 33 to 37% on like uh welfare alone and for like elderly people,
Yeah.
right? And 0.5% really isn't a lot, but the amount of data that we get from space and the studies that we can conduct and the opportunities that we are open to, it really does kind of put into perspective how much is sacrificed economically. And yeah, I think that's super important to realize. And again, with like the studying stuff, like studying agriculture on other planets, especially ones like Mars, it kind of allows us to predict how to solve agricultural issues on Earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Mars, we've kind of scientists have deemed as uh, was an exoplanet, right? It used to be able to potentially support life. So there could have been liquid water, arable land, etc. However, now it's, a barren wasteland. And we can by studying the soil and how plants grow, we could possibly apply that to the issues that Earth has with increasing drought and increasing soil degradation, etc.
Yeah. I agree with you
Right.
completely.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
also important that you. Oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was gonna say just like I like the points that you brought up about um how like we need to explore and then also take advantage of the other kind of almost learning from the other planet's mistakes. But
Exactly. Yeah.
understanding lunar materials, like as well, we also have
Yeah.
to mention like again, Changesite's one of them, but there are others that are very beneficial to just globally what we use in basically our daily lives, or not necessarily in our daily lives, but indirectly it goes to support you. There are forms of energy that are used, and there are forms that are used just in it's mainly of silica based, so it'll help out in
Mhm.
towards the silica area, but they try to help out with kind of supporting the humans in general. And I think it's important that without space exploration, we wouldn't be able to see things like Changesite, which we see today, and helium-3, which is going to help us with our energy crisis. But then again, like you said, space exploration will cause a lot of more space debris and will
Right.
pollute our environment. And
Hmm.
also, the military debate is another topic for another day,
Yes.
of course.
Yes.
But like you said about the funding isn't astronomically high when it comes to the
Right.
reward, right? The reward
Right.
outweighs the risk in the turn, the I guess case of NASA. But
Right.
I think it's important to explore beyond our world, because just a long time back, people used to believe that the Earth was flat, right? And now we have through exploration, and we have definitely, definitely
Yes.
100%,
Yes.
110% confirmed that the Earth is round, and we've
Yeah.
explored beyond that, observing just completely beyond our expectations of what the universe is, and we're constantly
Yeah.
searching to find
Exactly.
where the world or where the universe began. And so constantly searching that is very, I guess, interesting and can really tell us a lot about the world. And so
Right. Right. Right.
using
Right.
using telescopes like the James Hubble telescope, the James Webb telescope and the Hubble telescope, it's important to see kind of just the composition of space, and that can also help
Yeah.
out with
Yeah.
future endeavors.
Right, I agree. And like being able to understand our role in the world and in the greater like galactic universe, right?
Yeah.
It as you said, like flat Earth and kind of exploring that, oh, this country that we live in isn't the only country in the world, or we're not the center of the solar system or the universe.
Yeah.
It's really crucial to changing our perspective and the knowledge of who we are and what role we play here, you know?
Yeah.
And it doesn't only just enlighten us in that way, but it also enables us to be able to create infrastructure and change our attitudes and just create more quality ways of life for um, the other organisms and the environment
Mm-hmm.
and fellow humans on Earth.
Yeah.
Because with more knowledge, we can act more rationally
Mm-hmm.
and develop more organized solutions to issues that we face every day.
Yeah, and I also another reason is I think that aliens are out there, and that's an episode for another
Yeah,
day, right? But I
yeah,
do
yeah,
believe
yeah,
that if we have the very slim chance of us,
yeah.
existing, right? Because the probability of me being here on recording this podcast today with you is so statistically insignificant
Right?
that like it's
It's
just
basically it's impossible.
yeah, it's literally near impossible, right? We are the
Yeah.
one person that could say they did it, the one in a I
In
can't
this
even
specific
imagine the
time,
number,
under
the
these exact specific like circumstances,
yeah.
we decided to say this at this time. Like, I agree with you.
But also, I think that for the possibility of us to have that opportunity, I feel like there's something out there just because of how large the universe is, right?
And
I
it's ever
think
expanding,
exactly. So I
right?
believe
Right.
that there is something out there, or there are people out there. But that's an episode for another day. Then we could
Yeah.
talk about maybe some conspiracy theories or such. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's
Great idea.
important to highlight that in order to explore, we need to understand the pros and cons, like you said, but highlighting that yes, we need to clean up after the massive mess that we're creating. And so, like you said about the Japan versus China almost in the new space
Yeah.
race, I think this is very
Yeah.
interesting about how we're having a new
I
wave
agree. Yeah.
of this almost just a repair effort that we've seen, and this is not just in space, and I've seen this quite a lot more. And so with the newer generations, I think newer generations are taking more importance on the environment and cleaning up after
Right, right,
themselves.
right, right.
And so we're seeing a lot more carbon friendly items and a lot more helping the environment out, cleaning up after themselves, being a lot more or having less of a
Conscious
carbon
about their act.
footprint, right? Just being more
Yeah, yeah,
conscious
yeah.
about themselves. And so seeing this kind of Japan versus China about the new space race about removing junk, it's just kind of just a little wholesome. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's important to see that, that there are good things, but I
Mhm.
I'm interested also on seeing the moon and how if that's going to be colonized or
Yeah,
not. I'd say by 2030 there's going to be some colonization effort for sure.
yeah, of course. Yeah, that's definitely possible. Right. And also, when it comes to like space exploration, it's very easy to get you kind of get lost in the uh, impossibility of alien life or the impossibility of there not being alien life, right?
Yeah,
But we're not gonna ever concretely find it if we don't at least try, unless they
exactly.
come to us first, of course. But yeah, so let's also move on to discuss some negatives
Sure.
about space exploration because there's always gonna be something, right? So space debris, right?
Yeah.
Like that's something that we've already talked about. Like the space exploration causes space debris, right? Which could also cause possible sickness of humans on Earth
Hmm.
due to radiation and like the space junk crashing down. Because like there was that one like city or village in Russia that had that incident where space debris landed and a bunch of people got sick out of the and we didn't know like maybe there was a correlation, was there causation, we
Yeah.
didn't know. An environmental concern, right? Being able to launch a rocket into space that causes so many emissions and like the debris itself and all the chemicals that you're pumping into the atmosphere, like that obviously has an environmental effect, which is always probably not good,
Yeah.
right? But, but yeah, also as we mentioned, even though uh, the budget for NASA it takes about 0.5% of the U.S. national budget.
Yeah.
The U.S. national budget is like $407 billion, I believe,
4 point.
and
The budget for NASA, the budget for the
or
U.S.
the budget for the U.S. like the U.S.
4.7.
national budget, right,
Yes.
is point $407 billion. So 0.5% of 407 billion dollars is still many million
I
dollars,
think
right?
it's 4.7 trillion. I could be no, yeah, it's 4.7 trillion. It's
Oh, 4.7 trillion.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's even bigger then. Um the US national budget, right,
Yeah.
is 4.7 trillion. So, like 0.5% of that is still a lot. It's still a lot of money. Millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? So, there's obviously issues of poverty, hunger, water insecurity in the world or even in the US, right?
Yeah.
And by turning your like focus to like putting in that much money into like space exploration, you can argue that that poverty, hunger, and water insecurity isn't getting any closer to being solved.
Hmm.
However, there's always the argument that it's only 0.5% and allocating that much isn't going to really affect it. But I feel like even a little bit is still going to help,
Hmm.
right? Like or like increasing what the US government could do is increase like programs or reallocate money from other places instead of like NASA,
Hmm.
in which like it's unnecessary to invest that much money in. We could, reallocate into education, poverty, hunger, and water insecurity.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
But
think
there's pros and cons to space
yeah,
exploration.
for
Like
sure.
leave that up to you guys. Yeah.
And then also like we've also mentioned like on all the other topics that we've had throughout. our 24 episodes, including this one, we've talked about just how we could spend. I feel like this is just an overarching thing about how we can always spend our money better. And so I think it's important to realize what the people want, but also making them aware of the situations and circumstances that people are in. Because if you're going to tell me just a certain amount or just a certain just sliver of, or almost not necessarily a white lie, but just, I guess it is, right? If you tell me a
Yeah.
sliver of what's going on and then ask me, okay, where are we putting our money? Of course, I'm going to put that in that area. But when you introduce this plethora of just all these problems that we have and all these things that we could do with our money, I think it's important to just look at it more holistically instead of looking at it with a more narrowed viewpoint. Because as you narrow your viewpoint in, just you kind of lose sight of your visuals that you can see to the side of you. And so instead of just, very narrowly focusing on one specific idea that you want to focus, look at it a little bit more holistically. So I challenge people to kind of take a little bit more holistic view on
Right, right.
just like this, just anything in general, like with space
Just general,
exploration,
right?
right? That's
Yeah.
interesting. So I think incorporating that into maybe what you want to see in the future is important. But then there's also more after that.
Of course. Right. And with that, our discussion comes to an end. We thank you for listening and hope you'll stay tuned for future episodes. Don't forget to follow the Pepper Podcast on Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you.